So it's an honor to me to be here today. Okay. Our presentation today is about fraud. We like to say no more fraud. Let's say enough is enough for fraud. We need to remove this thing from the PBX world. There's no technical justification for us to have fraud in 2014. There are mechanisms enough to solve this problem. So let's analyze the problem a bit. So about me, ooh, it's a bit, okay, perfect, great. Let's move. Well, he already introduced me. So why security is relevant? Why you should care? 7 years ago, we had our first case of fraud. And it was a very serious one. It was an IVR. And it cost the customer something close to $100,000. Well, 200,000 reais at that time. This case is still in court. And I believe it will be decided on the next years. It's 7 years from now. So no one exactly knows how much this will cost. Because there are attorney fees and everything. So whenever you have a fraud, it's a big issue. Everybody will try to say it's not my problem. The telco will say it's not mine. The owner of the PBX, my passwords were safe. The owner of the system, this was a managed system, will say no, it's not my problem. You provided very, very weak passwords to your customers. And this thing goes sometimes to the juridic system, and it's very hard to settle. The judges do not even understand what you're talking about in most cases, right? So it's very hard. So that's why you should care. It affects you. It's really bad for business. Think, you have this news on the New York Times this week, on Monday. $116,000 of toll fraud. Okay, next time you're going to do a sales presentation. Okay, I'm bringing you this new technology, Asterisk PBX. It's a great PBX. It can bankrupt your company in a week. So fraud is really bad for business, and we need to find a way to remove these from our systems once and for all. So the exposure of a single T1 line in 1 month, that it's usually the time that you're going to receive your phone bill, is close to $5 million. AT&T charges $5 per minute for an international call for some destinations. You have 43,200 minutes per month in 23 lines. It's about $5 million. So you can install a technology in your customer that can lead him to an exposure of $5 million a month. Have you thought about this? How dangerous is the technology that we work with? It's one of the few technologies that can bankrupt a customer. And actually, in that case, 7 years ago, it did it. The guy went out of business because of the lack of credit. The telephone company simply cut his credit, put his name in one of this bad credit stuff. So it's really hard. It's something that we should care about. Why hackers are doing this? Well, an image talks by itself. Easy money. So what they can do, Eric has told you this morning this, they allocate a number in a PRN provider, in a premium rate number provider. There are 85 according to him. Very easy, you can go to the internet and do it now. In 5 minutes you can have an account. You can have your recordings in this account, and they have a nice control panel. Many VoIP providers are not able to give you a nice control panel of how much you are spending. Telcos do not give you a control panel of how much you are spending. But hackers give you a control panel of how much you are earning on the system. You allocate a number, 25 cents per minute. They give you back, do you receive this money on Western Union or MoneyGram or whatever. 5 minutes you can do this. In another 5 minutes, you can find a vulnerable device and show them, as Eric has showed you this morning. And in another 5 minutes, you can start making calls and cashing your money on one of the systems. So it's very easy. I believe it's the easiest money on the internet right now for hackers. There are more attacks to SIP than all the other protocols combined. If you go to a honeypot that checks all the addresses, actually there's one in Brazil called a cert.br, they have a bunch of honeypots doing this. If you take all the attacks combined, they do not represent not even 10% of the city attacks. So that's the real issue that we are dealing with. So now let me share a bit of intelligence coming from the honeypots. What we are seeing from these guys, what we are seeing they do. Distribution by country. You can expect attacks from any place. It's not something coming from a strange country. It's coming from US, France, Deutschland, Palestine, Russia, Taiwan, Seychelles Island, SG, Singapore, Great Britain, or Canada. That's what we are seeing on the honeypots in the attacks. We hold 3 honeypots on the internet in different countries, but actually what we are seeing in one country is exactly what we are seeing in other countries. There's not much difference between the samples in one honeypot or the other. Next, top prefixes. The top prefixes right now is Palestine. It's funny, this thing. I'm not sure really what is the most popular destination, because these top prefixes, I can say, hey, I have more attacks to Palestine. But these can mean 2 things. The first one is, yes, we have lots of attacks to Palestine. The second one is the hacker is not good enough and didn't figure out that my honeypot is not completing the calls. So he's sending a bunch of calls forever, and he never even had the work to say if it works or not. So maybe some other destinations, the guy tried just once and say, hey, it's not ringing, so let's not try again. But these are the top prefixes on the honeypot. Top 5 PBX exploits in September and October. Another thing that we have on the honeypots that we closely look are the attacks to the HTTP port. We have one honeypot that pretends to be a free PBX, another honeypot that pretends to be an Asterisk, and one that pretends to be a Linksys router. Right? So we receive different types of attacks. Shell shock is the most popular. This is a specimen taken in September 2014. So it's remote code execution. You can see the bean bash. It sends the traffic to the TCP to 195.225.34.14. So if you see these types of things on your Apache log file, these are the shell shock attacks. They announced the exploit, I believe it was on Wednesday. On Thursday, we were seeing the attacks on the PBX. One day after the spore. Right? This is, I think we are having more shell shock attempts now than any other. The second type of attack that we are receiving are SQL injection for Trixbox. It's an exploit from March of this year. You're going to see something on the meetme conf.cdr.php. In the page, you have a lot more selects, and they select the username and password from the file, and they can hack your PBX very easily. Linksys remote code execution. This is another attempt, but this attempt is against Linksys routers. Linksys routers. We have one customer in the last year with a single Linksys 3102, one FXO port, more or less $20,000 of fraud in a single device, a single FXO port. In the end of the month, the bill was about $20,000. Next, LAMP attacks. We are seeing lots of attacks also to PHP infrastructure. So if you have an old version of PHP, you are really open to these types of attacks. In the first place, you see something like this. It's very mnemonic. It's very hard to understand. But if you decode the URL, you're going to get this attack on the honeypot. So these are the top 5. I have on the end of the slides at least 7 more. And the number 5 is the call me number, also very popular. This is from, the exploit was published in 2012, but it's still there. And this is an interesting one to show. I'll show you a small demo on what they are doing with your PBX. My assistant, the Eliakim, we We joke always with him, Eliakim Skywalker. He did this short video for us. So in the first part, we are going to listen on the port 4446. It's a remote code execution attack. NCAT LVP will open the port 4446. Okay, open it. Very similar to what happens with shell shock. And then in the second step, we are going to execute the exploit. The exploit will generate a call, and the other side will originate a call, and the other side of the call, there is an exec, right? Then exec opening sockets to the remote code execution. So the user will answer the phone ringed, user answered, and now we have a connection to the PBX started a connection to our NCAT. Now we are doing the sudo nmap interactive, nmap, shell. Okay. Now you can do a vim etc asterisk zip.com and grab all the passwords. And many people are being hacked using these types of attacks these days. Just let the interface open on the internet and you are completely open to the world. These are not hard attacks to protect against. It's just to have a firewall. But there are lots of people simply installing Asterisk without any firewall, without any IP tables. They let the interface open on the internet for the administrator or for the user. It doesn't make sense. It's really a dangerous thing to do. Let's move back to the presentation. Unknown exploits. And there's also something that we cannot identify. This is something new. It's not, let's say, was not reported elsewhere. You're still investigating. So you can patch whatever you want. There will always be something that you don't know. Right? Because hackers are always ahead of you. They're always trying something completely new. This one, I don't know what they are trying to do on the recordings locale SBCs. I don't have a clue. No one has reported, no one has seen what it is. So we need some ways to overcome this. It's still uncommon. What we are not seeing yet. Manager port 5038. We are not seeing many attacks to this port. Actually, in our honeypots, we haven't catched any. H2323, no. MGCP, no. TFTP, no. Any IX2, no. So we are not seeing lots of attacks to these ports, but I believe they are next. Whenever we protect one side, they will try another side. How hackers are getting to your PBX? So the first thing, they are trying brute force. If brute force is not enough, fail to ban is effective for the brute force. So if you have fail to ban, it helps for the first type. HTTP exploitation, the ones I shown you. Attacks to the phones, very easy to do. They go to the showdown and look for yelling phones, try the default password. There are some phones in older firmware versions that do not even ask for a password. Caller ID spoofing is another way. Caller ID spoofing is a little more trick. What they do with caller ID spoofing is they find a provider capable to do 1 million calls with less than 1 second. Calls with less than 3 seconds in many places are not charged, right? And they spoof the caller ID with a premium rate number. Send the call to 1 million phones and they will receive, many people will see the phone, we will see the premium rate number and they will dial back. Probably with 1 million calls they will receive back maybe 100,000 calls back using caller ID spoofing. Yeah, very hard to protect against this. And billing and credit card frauds are also common. They try to get an account in your provider on any way, provide you false credit cards, false information to make calls at the end of the month. You cannot collect anything from them. How to defend. So in part 3 of this presentation, I want to show you how to defend. So I will analyze 5 ways. Patching everything and upgrade frequently. Use a firewall, use a session border controller, use encryption, or use an anti-fraud system. So let's start with the first part. Patch everything all the time. The first place, it's not very effective because new attacks are getting into our system all the time. So with patch shell shock today, tomorrow we will have Poodle. On the next month, the Golden Retriever, and the other, I don't know what kind of name they will give to an attacker, right? So it's like the Sisyphus work, to roll the rock on the hill, right? It's impossible, and the cost is high, and the risk is very high. Well, try to upgrade an Asterisk 1.2 to Asterisk 1.11 or 1.12. What are the risks? How many things will stop working? Let's suppose that you have customized a lot your system. Take an Elastic server, very customized for your needs, update it to the next one. It will take a lot of time, it will take a lot of effort. So for me, it's clearly not the best way to do it because it's like the Sisyphus work. You have to do it all the time. Use a firewall or configure properly on IP tables. This is mandatory. Yeah, without a firewall or without an IP tables, you shouldn't be in this business. Actually, if you're not able to configure a firewall and you are working with an Asterisk, you shouldn't be working with this. It's a very dangerous technology. It can bankrupt your customers. If you're not able to configure a firewall, don't do it. Don't install it. It's too risky. At least we cannot give access to the SSH port or HTTPS port. If you really need to give access to the HTTP port, use a VPN or use a reverse proxy with authentication or use dual authentication, changing the HT access. But you need to have a firewall. If this firewall is external or internal, depends on you, right? Depends on what you prefer. If you are familiar with IP tables for me is more than enough in many cases. SBCs, session border controllers. Session border controllers are really a good choice, but they are mainly a good choice when you have lots of equipment. Let's suppose you have 10 SS7 gateways, 2 media servers, 2 proxies, 40 Asterisk servers. It's very hard to patch one by one, configure a firewall one by one. It's much clever to have an SBC as a single point of protection. So hide everything behind an SBC. The cost is usually high. The risk is medium. One thing that I would say to you for SBCs is pay a lot of attention of tech support. You're not buying a box. You're buying a guy that will check for you all the time, attacks and everything. You are buying actually the people and the technology behind the box. Just the box is not enough to protect. Sometimes you say, hey, I'm not getting to complete calls. What's happening in my SBC? This type of customer is not working. So it's really intensive in terms of knowledge, the SBC. Use encryption. Encryption is another possibility. You can use TLS. You can use SRTP. The effectiveness is medium. It's interesting. When you use TLS on Asterisk, you have to think that TLS is an encryption technology. It's not an authentication technology, right? You can use TLS to authenticate, but in the way that is implemented on Asterisk is not an authentication mechanism, right? You're bringing not the private key, you're bringing to you the public key. Everybody has access to the public key, just to encrypt the traffic. But anyone can make a brute force over an HTTPS connection. You can go to a bank and an HTTPS connection and put several names and passwords. This is the same with SIP. If you're using encrypted SIP, TLS, you still can try many names and passwords over a TLS connection. So it's an encryption technology. It's usually not an authentication technology. It can be, but if you want to do mutual authentication, the cost is very high. You have to generate certificates for all the phones. So it's much harder to do. And the last solution that I want to mention is an anti-fraud system. The effectiveness is high, the risk is low, and the cost is medium. Anti-fraud system can detect 99.999% of the attacks. It prevents against caller ID spoofing, social engineering, and phones attacks. Limitations. There's a limitation for an anti-fraud. You need to have a firewall to avoid anyone tampering with your anti-fraud rules. So sorry about the Skype here. What we can do together, what we have done to prevent fraud once and for all. The first step, in 2 steps we can fight fraud and prevent fraud for any PBX. The first one is to have a firewall configured, right? We have to make sure that no one can access the PBX and tamper the rules. The second one, we can use the TFPS, the fraud prevention system. We have built a system based on the information from the Honeypots that it's very simple to use. So fraud prevention for all, TFPS. Let me show you how this works. The idea of TFPS is very simple. It works exactly like LNP jeeps. How many of you have done LNP jeeps for portability numbers? You go to a database, it sends a redirect to you. You can do, in Brazil it's very popular because of GSM gateways. We do more than 1,000 calls per second, more than 1,000 LNP jeeps per second, right? And we can get to more or less the same thing. 99.989% of the attacks can be prevented just by protocol signature. Most of the attacks have a signature on the packet, right? The signatures can be on the from header, can be on the request URI, can be on the user agent. There are many places in the SIP packet where we can discover that this packet is fraudulent or not. Looking for the traffic on the honeypots, 99.89% is preventable. 99.89. What's the idea? If I took all the attacks that I have received on the honeypots and pass it to the rules that we have for signature detection, they would block 99.89%. Next, collaborative protection. Any PBX attack generates a blacklist of the IP address and dialed number. And the most interesting part is the mechanism. We use a mechanism called the SIP redirect. What is a SIP redirect? Probably you already know about HTTP. You send an HTTP request and you receive a 302, move it temporarily to another page. Probably you have seen this page moving from one page to the other. We have the same thing on SIP. You send a call to a place, and this place sends back to you a 302 message, redirect. And with this redirect, we can have a code saying that this call is fraudulent or not. It's the same thing as an LNP jeep. You send this call to it's more or less like sending a call to a SIP provider. You send the call, and it sends back a 302. But now with a code saying, this is a fraudulent call or not. Or what's the chance of being a fraudulent call? Good thing here, no additional hardware required. It's available for OpenSIPs, FreeSwitch, and Asterisk. Let me show you how it works. In the server, whenever we're doing an international call, we'll add some headers. Received, header, user agent. We'll count the number of calls. We add a header with the number of calls. And then we are going to dial this server outside. Look, you don't need to mess with 95% of your calls. You need to do this only for international calls or very expensive calls. Then the system will return to you a code, and this code will, as a redirect, will re-inject on your Asterisk code. So if your call is approved, for calls not approved, the code always starts with R, right? So you can do a playback and authorize it, or you can send to the operator. Let's suppose I want to be sure that I will not lose the call, right? So you can send this call to the operator to say who's calling. If it's a hacker, it will never answer, right? So you can do whatever you want when the call is not approved, and for calls approved, you can simply answer, dial the original destination, and send ahead. So it's in real time, before the call is made. You send a call to a provider, the provider sends back the redirect, and then you make the call to the final destination. Okay, 99.89 is not enough, right? So we need to go further. So for the rest of the calls, you can make a profile and create where are you going to allow calls from which countries based on IP, to which countries based on prefix. And then calls during working hours. How many calls are going to allow for international destinations during work hours and off hours, right? What's the maximum number of daily calls to a specific destination on hours and off hours? With these behavior rules, you can discard probably more than 99% of the remaining calls very easily. The good things about the system, comparing to other anti-fraud solutions: no hardware required. You don't have to install any box in that. Very small traffic needs to be analyzed. You don't need to send your whole CDR to somewhere else, just international calls. It's small risk. Only a few calls can be affected. And for the calls affected, you can send to an operator for further handling. And easy handlings of outages on the dial plane. Let's suppose that the server does not answer. You can take the congestion, send to the operator for manual authorization or use a password authorization or anything else. So the risk is really low. I don't know if the time permits, but I could show you. Okay, go ahead.
Is there any way to block PNR numbers in your PBX? Like, is there any way to distinguish that this is a PNR number?
No, there's no way to distinguish a PRN number because it's a normal international number, right? When you go to a place, let me show you one operator. Just to answer this question. Okay, so this is a premium rate number. Oh, sorry. This is a premium rate number. It's just a simple international number. Interpremium is one of the operators of one of the 85 operators of premium rate numbers. You can simply go there and allocate one of these numbers and hear what they are paying. 26 cents of a dollar. This is more than most customers pay for a VoIP call. Right? So this is where they get their money. And probably they will say in some place, I will pay you in 1 day using Western Union or MoneyGram or whatever. These are not big operators. It's just a page on the internet and someone hacked on in some place selling this number. And the number is, look there, test number, 387, Bosnia, nothing specific. So, but anytime I receive an attack on a honeypot or in a customer, the dialer number goes to a blacklist. So we have a blacklist of almost 40,000 dialer numbers. IP addresses also. IP addresses are automatic. Dialed numbers are not automatic because they come in several ways, like 9011, 8011, 0011, 00, plus they try whatever they can to complete the call.
PRNs that are also within the area code or the country code of 1, so it's like a,
yes,
like a Caribbean number?
The Caribbean numbers, there are many. I believe they probably have a key. Anguilla is 1264. Yeah, they are. But actually, the TFPS detects when you create the destinations. If you create US, it's not the +1. You authorize state by state. If you don't want to authorize the Caribbean countries, you can. You can do it.
Any other questions?
I forgot to say something. For small PBXs, it's free. The detection is free, right? So you can go there, create your account, and use it. Up to 1 call per minute for sporadic use is free.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much, Flavio.
Oh, thank you.